Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today I want to talk about whether the UK needs a culture of confidence. And when I'm talking about the UK, I'm talking about you and me. Those of you predominantly who are watching this from the UK, obviously if you're not and you're from the States or Europe or whatever it may be, maybe you can chime in and let me know your thoughts. Now I'm saying this because obviously globally we're going through a very, very difficult time based on what is happening. Okay, so the tariff stuff that's happening, that's being imposed on other countries from the States, is causing craziness in the markets, which is causing a lack of confidence with investors and businesses, which is then trickling down into the bond market, where again, people who usually invest in bonds, who typically would use that as a safe haven, it's now like we can't even afford that potentially. So they're selling their bonds. So for those who understand that, the bond system, should I say bonding, the bond system is essentially what defines our economic system. But that spews out all of the media sort of like stuff that we see online on social media, on the YouTubes, on the news, etc., giving this idea of panic and turmoil and all this kind of stuff there. Now, of course, obviously, post Brexit, things have been a bit crazy. Okay, so the majority of the UK wanted their own independence. The referendum happened when David Cameron was about, and so this whole thing around Brexit was brought about, and then it happened. And of course, since then, we've had to sort of like fend for ourselves and be on our own 2 feet. You know, even though we still have the remnants of the EU, okay, in the same breath, we've had to create our own things, whether this is legislation or frameworks or intellectual property or how we deal with our health and safety and all that kind of stuff there. So largely a lot of that stuff has been adopted, but there's still other stuff that we've had to deal with ourselves. And of course, with this in mind, this requires funding, doesn't it? It requires funding. It requires infrastructure. It requires a different way in order for us to do certain things. And so that increases cost, which comes from taxes and all that kind of stuff there, which puts pressure on us, let alone the fact that there's been different things happening between Russia and Ukraine and other places across the world, which has either increased spend towards, again, sort of like aid, or increases spend towards, again, supporting war or protection, and increased aid towards, again, endeavors within the UK, i.e. through taxes. Okay? And so with that in mind, you've got all these rises in costs and everything else, which we're feeling, okay, on a one-to-one basis. And it just makes it harder because our wages are not increasing at the speed at which we're being taxed and or at the speed at which things are raising in cost, which we know as inflation, okay? And so with that in mind, there is this sense that we don't rate the UK. We're seeing loads of videos. I'm included, okay? I've contributed to this. UK this, UK that, UK. And it's not the place to be in. And yet we're here. So it doesn't matter what we're saying. Obviously there are some people who are leaving or left, but we're here. So in the back of our minds, we know we have potential, but there is something that doesn't necessarily feel like we can do it. And of course, there are various factors to that. I'm not acting like I don't know some of those factors, but I want you to come on this journey with me. So really and truly, I'd like to, based on my notes, compare us to the US. Okay, so many of you would agree with this. Some may not. But US citizens, rain or shine, okay? And it feels like the majority. I don't know if it's the loudest bunch or whether this is the majority. But there is a deeper sense of it's not over until we sort of like die, okay? Or quit, so to speak. And they're not looking to quit. And so in the UK, there is this element of humility being a virtue. And the question then becomes, is this overplayed? Or is it just dampening spirits? In contrast, you've got other cultures, whether this is in Africa, okay, or Asia, or the US, where they embrace a certain level of confidence. And so it's celebrated and then it encourages those individuals to do more. Now, I'm talking about confidence and not arrogance necessarily. And so my question is, if someone British did that inherently, would that be deemed as a bad thing? And I know a lot of you would say yes, but why? Oh, because you should be humble. Why? Because humility is a virtue. I don't think people would say humility is a virtue. It just stop at that. It almost seems as though somebody is showing off. And so this is where you get people doing things on a DL when, I'm not going to do anything. Thinking that that is the solution to their challenges or problems. But then everyone's doing that. So why is that unique or special? And so this is me not saying that keeping things on the DL is not a good thing and all that kind of stuff there. But it being guided in the right light with the right context makes sense. But if people are telling you to do this because they don't like the fact that you are appearing braggadocious to them, even though you're trying to lift your own confidence, then that may be challenging or a bit of a problem. So there's this whole idea of fear of failure, okay? So basically it's like, let's think about it this way. So, let's say person A, okay, is driving down the road and it's 20 miles per hour, but by accident, they went over by 2 miles per hour and they got flashed by a light. That's invoked fear now. That's invoked fear. You don't want to either drive anymore because everywhere in London is full of these 20 mile per hour roads, and I understand why. Or two, you drive slower, but it frustrates you. So it's like, what's the point in going out? Really poor example, but the point being made is there is this penalized nature. You're penalized for failure. And so, the UK sometimes is seen as being a bit of I'm going to say an ick with a D, okay? And so with that in mind, it's like you can't do anything, you can't go anywhere, it feels like a prison state, etc., etc. And so if you fail, you are the worst person in the world. It doesn't matter whether this is within the workplace, whether this is within the schooling system, whether this is within the government. You failed. What do you mean you failed? Like, you're not seen in the same light. And so you have to do things at an exceptional level before you're even recognized. Now, some may argue that that's only if you're trying to get into the public light or whatever it may be. But the persecution also happens with family, with friends, with society. We've seen it already. People don't necessarily support their friends unless they're killing it. And then all of a sudden they want to know. Do you know what I mean? Oh yeah, I have been following your stuff. Oh yeah, you haven't been following. You've seen it and you've like, okay, he's doing this thing, and then you move on. Which is okay. But don't lie. The point I'm making is that excellence is really forced so much to the point where it feels like you can't do anything. Sometimes you're debilitated in your tracks. And so there is this element of penalizing one for failing, so to speak, or at least not achieving higher heights. The other thing is something known as the tall poppy syndrome. Okay, so it's individuals who take bold action, who stand out, whether this is knowingly or not, but essentially they get cut down. So the whole idea of the analogy is that if you're a tall poppy, because you stand out, you get sliced down. And so usually these individuals get intense scrutiny. Think of athletes, for example, the Ronaldos of the world, the Jordans of the world, the Tiger Woods of the world, all these different people. Whether their excellence is exuded through what they actually do in terms of their performance, whether they speak out or whether they portray themselves a certain way, there's always something to say. And the media is ready. The media is hungry and ready to say something because obviously doom and gloom and criticism sells because we feed off negative energy for whatever reason. And so with that in mind, it's like, wow, why would I want to be a tall poppy when I can be a short one? In other words, you are that flea. When the ceiling is removed from the glass, you can't go past the glass. You can't go past the cup that you're in. You stay within that level. And so these are some of the things to bear in mind. And of course, when it comes to the media, we focus on things like scandal, debt, drugs, this, that, rich, poor, this, black, white, all of that kind of stuff. And we know when it comes to the demographics and the classism, it is big because there is more attention on that stuff. So I've spoke a lot really about the what I'm calling the confidence deficit, i.e. the gap of confidence that we have and what's filling that space. And I want to move into the economic and career impact. So I'm putting both entrepreneurship and sort of like the 9 to 5 career into one hat. And essentially, we have this whole situation where we have one of the best educations in the world, okay? Best educations in the world. Whether that be, it doesn't have to be the Oxbridge situation. It could be sort of like a Leicester University or whatever it may be, you know? The point being made is our education is treated as good. And this is why we have so many international students who come to the UK to study. But when it comes to translating those sort of like graduates into startups, and having investors invest into these startups as graduates or whatever it may be, we are behind. We don't have that. One, we don't necessarily have many venture capitalists or investors invest in this stuff. Of course they do, but I don't know the situation deeply. So maybe talk to your investor friends if you have any, or do the research. But two, there is a fear to do it. Don't get me wrong. There's a rise of this whole bootstrapping nature, which I'm a huge fan of. I think is a good thing. But at the same time, there are some businesses, especially as startups, that really can be promoted or boosted or grow based on investment. We just don't have that because of that fear element. Based on that failure thing that I spoke about before, it's best to be conservative with your approach. In addition, when it comes to the workplace, people settle. People don't negotiate. People are scared to move on. People don't want to rock the boat. People are happy with the situation because, you know, maybe they need to pay black tax, okay, at home. Or maybe it's a situation where they're scared that the job market's not going to give them what they need. They don't step into that leadership role. They don't put their hand up or say what they need to say in meetings. People just stay in the space that they're in. There's this sense of quiet quitting or the great resignation, as they spoke about during the pandemic. You've also got situations as consultants and contractors. So I had this conversation today where individuals feel undersold because they didn't get the right rate, or they don't necessarily negotiate more money, or they're taking on more work because they're like, oh yeah, might as well. For what? This causes brain deadness. It causes you to feel drained. There's no energy. You feel burnt out. It's just very wasteful in terms of energy. So it's kind of like, what do we do about this situation? Now, before I continue, my friends have told me to continue to do this. If you want to see more things like this in your inbox and related to careers, consulting, portfolio stuff, then feel free to check out the link in the description to sign up to my newsletter. So what does a culture of confidence look like? So I want to make this really, really clear. Conviction, courage, and contribution. I wrote this in my notes. Conviction, courage, and contribution. You need to be convicted in who you are as a person. Believe your source, okay? This is based on what you've done before. You need to have the courage or the audacity to essentially believe that you can do great things and you don't need the validation from other people to do that stuff. But you also need to be contributing, not only to yourself, but to others in the wider community. Because when you do this and you create that positive feedback loop, you are more likely going to achieve greater heights based on the desired aligned aims that you want for yourself. So conviction, contribution, and courage. Don't forget those 3 C's. The other thing is, there definitely needs to be more people doing these 3 things. People starting more businesses, people leading some sort of change or initiative, so some community-driven thing, okay? This could be political, apolitical, whatever it may be, and people owning their voices. We need all of them. We need the entrepreneurs to create the innovation or to maintain things or to create revenue or jobs for society. We need those people contributing towards community causes, political causes, to change the system and to get people to see and understand that there is more to just making money. We need those other individuals who are able to actually use their voice. No one's heard them sing. No one's heard them speak. No one's heard them be present. But they have something to say. You have something to say. And you have to be able to step into that belief in order for you to, again, have that culture of confidence. It starts with us. We shouldn't be looking for other people. It starts with us. Whether this video inspires you to do this or someone else inspires you to do this, it starts with you. Take small steps, but take the steps. We also need to be able to be in a situation of, why not me? If not me, who will it be, so to speak? I spoke about the USA. I spoke about Africa. In African countries, it's different. You know, whether you're Ghanaian, Nigerian, Sierra Leone, Cameroon, whatever it may be, Gambian, South African, Kenyan, there is this whole element in African countries where they don't care or notice their demographics, so to speak. Solely when they come to Western countries, okay, where they recognize their race because there is a certain energy or attitude that they may encounter. But even then, they're like, okay, these people ain't going to stop me. So whether this is from a racial standpoint, whether this is from a gender standpoint, whether this is from a sex standpoint, whether this is from any sort of difference standpoint, why not you? It can be you. Of course it can be you. But you need to believe in your source. And typically, people who are within this space don't believe in themselves enough. So where does this all start? Well, I typically say competence equals confidence. Competence being the skills that are required in order for you to achieve a specific aim or goal. So think about what goal you're trying to achieve, and that stems from who you're aiming to be or who you're trying to become. That is then based on your values, the things that you deem as important, based on the experiences that you've had, based on your context, based on your background, based on your wants and your not wants, so to speak, so your preferences. When you understand all of these things, you know exactly what you're seeking from life because you deem it as important. And sometimes if you don't know what is important, you know what you want to avoid. And so start thinking about the competencies that you need to develop. What do you need to face head on? What skills can you develop in order for you to achieve X aim? And practice that. So maybe you start off with the apprenticeship era. This is what not Malcolm Gladwell, but here, the guy who wrote 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene, he talks about in his book Mastery. Start off with apprenticeship, then move on to sort of practice. Once you practice, you want to add a spin on it, your sort of edge to it. And then once you've added your edge, you implement. So you have to have that foundational patience and have delayed gratification to develop those skills, to will into existence what you want for your future right now. So there has to be that sense. In the workplaces, and this is a big one, workplaces, leaders need to imbue a certain level of confidence and encouragement and coaching into their staff. Yes, there needs to be strong management, but there has to be the right level of feedback. Okay, feedback being, what outputs have they produced and does it meet a certain standard? If not, why? Give people the feedback. Give your direct reports feedback, and direct reports do the same for your line managers or your hiring managers. Okay, there has to be an element of psychological safety. And psychological safety is a balance between support and challenge. Okay, this you can check this out for yourself. If you have too much support, there's complacency. If you have too much challenge, then you're going to have anxiety. You need to have the right balance. Challenge allows you to be accountable. Support gives you the encouragement. That's exactly how it works. So we need to be bold and not just obedient, because we're very conservative in this country, but we have to be able to use that boldness to create innovation. Not improvement, but innovation, real change, difference. And when it comes to nationally, we need people who, is interesting, we need people who are not so cautious, but speak with intellectual, compassionate, and emotional conviction. We need that strong balance. We need someone who can understand the data, the structures, the backend, the frameworks. But we also need someone who understands people at a human level, at all different socioeconomic levels, so that there is that certain level of connection, that depth, that attraction, Really important that that happens. So what do you need to do? You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a title to lead. Leadership is by example. That is my definition of leadership. Leadership to me is living by example. And so that example comes from understanding your environment and defining how you want to live and then doing it. That's what leadership is. So you need to be the source, like how I may be encouraging you and or others to have that level of confidence to do more, have more, and be more, whether you believe in that model or not. I'm saying to you that you need to be the same for others. And typically, the easiest way to do that is to start focusing on your own goals. Start focusing on your own stuff. Give yourself permission to be great. Don't like undertone it. Give yourself permission to be great. And really think about what tangible things you can do. Really, tangibility is measured. Whether that, even if it's an emotional thing, emotions can be measured to a degree, i.e. the number of times you feel an emotion, what triggers that emotion, X, Y, and Z. You know, so think about those things. Think about what skills and competencies you need to succeed. So really, to conclude, there's been a lot of dog poo that's been happening globally and in the UK. Whether we're looking at Brexit, whether we're looking at all the different things that have happened beforehand, dot-com boom, 2008 crisis, we had, you know, the epidemic and pandemic that happened, the war in Ukraine and Russia, wars happening around the world, the economic crisis, the tariff, like there's been a lot. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. And so recognize this stuff. But if we allow it to defeat us, and of course the system is the system, if we allow it to defeat us with low morale, low confidence, it will be hard for us to move past certain things. And so we need to think to ourselves, whether this is in an entrepreneurship capacity, in a working capacity, in a community capacity, in a political capacity, whatever capacity it is, own that space and believe that you are the person who can actually take something to the next level. Believe it, man. Speak what you seek until you see what he says, as my wife always says. Anyway, if you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, soft economics, so to speak, and anything centered around contracting and consulting, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.